And we do have some new members joining us, and we're delighted to have them. Senator Morrissey, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, it's a pleasure to be here to serve with my other colleagues on this committee. I served in the House for almost 8 years, and I represent, as most people know, Richmond, a large swath of Central Virginia, including Chesterfield, Hopewell, Prince George, Dinwiddie, and look forward to a very working on your very important committee, Madam Chair.
It's our committee, but thank you. Glad to have you. Senator Kiggins.
Good morning. I'm Jen Kiggins. I represent the 7th Senate District from Virginia Beach and Norfolk, and I'm happy to be here.
We are delighted to have you join us. There may be additions to our committee, but they're probably lawmakers. They're lawmakers that we're already familiar with, and I'm sure you have developed relationships with. But thank you to our newest members who were recently elected. Before we begin our official business, I would ask the clerk to call the roll.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Excellent. I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping rules. We will call the bill patrons as we see them on our list, or on our sign-up list. We are always interested in taking public comment. We do ask our public commenters to keep their comments to 2 minutes. And of course, if you have a large group, we may actually say that only 5 minutes would be allocated to one side and 5 minutes to the other, just so you know the rules of the game up front. To bill patrons, if you do have an amendment in the nature of a substitute, it is always helpful if you can get that to us the day before. And I know things are very fluid, and I know that there will be exceptions to that rule, but to the degree you can cooperate with us, it's helpful if we have your amendments earlier. For bills that are re-referred to another committee, testimony will be heard in that committee. The Rehab and Social Services does not have a lot of subcommittees, but we have one. And that subcommittee is the ABC subcommittee. It was established in previous years. They have done yeoman's work in many areas. We will continue that subcommittee, and it will be chaired by Senator Mason. Other members will be Senator McPike, Senator Sproul, Senator Reeves, and Senator Cosgrove. Okay, members of the committee, I'm going to dispose of a few bills at this moment.
Madam Chair, can I just interrupt real quick?
Senator Reeves, can I wait until we dispose of these bills? I think I know what you want to do. Okay, Senate Bill 91, Senator Edwards, will be re-referred to Judiciary Committee. Senate Bill 471, Senator Reeves, will be re-referred to Education and Health. Senate Bill 53, Senator Stanley's bill will go by for the day. And Senate Bill 507, Senator Deed's bill, will also go by for the day. Before we get into our docket, I will...
Madam Chairman, do you need a motion?
Yes, I do need a motion. May I move that, or do I have to have a committee member move that?
Point of order, Madam Chairman. I think we need to do motions separately on each bill.
Re-referrals have to be done separately. Okay. Senate Bill 91, re-referred to Judiciary.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Voting.
Aye 15, no 0.
Senate Bill 471, re-referred to Education and Health.
So moved.
Oh, second. Clerk, open the roll. I do not need separate motions to go by for the day. Mr. Clerk, do I need a voice vote on going by for the day? Okay. Again, members, without objection, Senate Bill 53 and Senate Bill 507 will go by for the day. No objection. Okay, Senator Reeves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take just a couple of minutes and talk to my colleagues here on the dais as well as those in the audience. For the last 4 years, I've had the privilege to chair this committee and seen the wonderful things that we've been able to accomplish for our constituency and the citizens of the Commonwealth. And I was extremely delighted to know that I'd be yielding the chair to my colleague to my right, Senator Favola. And over the last 4 years, I've watched Barbara do some tremendous things with regard to some of the committees I appointed her to. And Madam Chair, I just wanted to tell you have my full support. I thank you for taking the time to do the gavel handoff, and to my other colleagues, and I look forward to your leadership this year. And I just wanted to say thank you. And for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to get to know Barbara personally, she's just a phenomenal lady who cares very deeply about a lot of the issues that we'll take up this year. And this commission, or this committee, out of probably all of them, probably works in some of the best bipartisan fashion you will see in the General Assembly, and we've tried to keep politics as best we could out of here. And Madam Chair, I know you and I both agree on that, and I just wanted to say thank you and for your leadership.
Thank you, Senator Reeves. I appreciate your work and certainly appreciate your leadership on these important issues. Okay, we're going to move to our docket, and I am going to go, rather than taking my bill first, I'd like to take the omnibus bill. Senator Reeves and Senator McPike worked very hard trying to consolidate different pieces of our ABC code, and also coming up with more umbrella licenses. There were also some adjustments to fees. Both of these gentlemen have submitted bills. They will be rolled together, but I would like to give each one of them an opportunity to speak. Senator McPike on Senate Bill 389.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I first wanted to thank the committee members that have worked on this for the past, I don't know, Senator, 3 or so years. Senator DeSteff, McDougall, Spruill, Mason, Senator Reeves, and the staff of ABC, Travis and his team, and David May. It's been an undertaking. This is, there's sort of a couple main buckets that we've tried to tackle. One of which is to consolidate the permit types and sort of the framework of the number of permits have exploded over the years. And so we've been able to, in this process, to consolidate these into some logical frameworks. We've also consolidated the fee amounts that make some sense as well, and restructure that, as well as to allow for future adjustments to fees by ABC in a structured public process. So hopefully at the end of this process, this is a way that we've been able to structure that would ease the understanding of the license and permit types as businesses go to apply. We know that since Prohibition, the original 12 permits, we ballooned up to over 120. This cuts several permit types down in half, but consolidates the authority to identify and move with the changing times with the different business models and allow a little bit more flexibility. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, and I know we also have some staff presentation and information. You have charts that have been handed out that show the different permit types, what the old license type is, and how that's rolled, and the permits are rolled into the new type before you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For those of us on the ABC sub, this is a kind of fruition of a lot of hard work, and I want to thank my colleagues, all those folks on the ABC sub, and especially ABC themselves for conducting a very good study over the last year, and the staff attorney, David May, for your countless hours of back and forth to all the members and to all the constituents that are involved. I don't know that many folks here really truly understand how hard David works to make sure we get consensus, to get in all the tweaks that everybody needs. But it's a somewhat big bill. There are a lot of moving parts. So rather than go into those, I'll probably have David summarize. But Madam Chair, right now, I'd make the motion to roll my bill into together and list us both as chief co-patrons. And then at that point, Madam Chair, once that motion is made, I would yield my time to the staff attorney to kind of explain the bill and take questions.
We will, motion made to roll Senator Reeves' bill into Senator McPike's bill. There's a second. Do we need a roll call vote? Okay. Please open the roll.
Scott, can you hit 2 times, please, for me?
Ayes 15, no
Okay.
0.
Well, that was our first easy vote. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if it please the chair, I would ask David May if you could please run through kind of the highlights of this. Are we doing?
One more cleanup item before, Madam Chair. We have a line amendments in a block, and I'd like to have those adopted.
Second.
Okay. Is there unanimous voice vote? Is there unanimous consent for the adoption of the amendments? Aye. All those voting aye?
Madam
Aye.
Chair, can we get the amendment before we
Yeah.
vote on it, please?
Madam Chair, I'll
Do you
leave
have the
staff
amendments?
to read the line amendments.
Yeah, Madam Chair, there'll be 4 line amendments total. These are very technical in nature, no substantive changes. The first is at the beginning of line 1120, strike on premises, insert on and off premises. The second line amendment is on line 1357. After consumption, insert comma, provided that any brand of wine not owned by the winery licensee is purchased from a wholesale wine licensee. We make the exact same amendment on line 1374 after consumption as well. And the fourth line amendment is on line 1456 after consumption, strike or, insert and. And what these line amendments break down to are two simple points. One is that technically, these on-premises licenses don't exist anymore. Anyone with on-premises privileges now also has off-premises privileges. It makes that clarification from existing code language. It also requires that when a winery is selling wines not produced by that winery, they have to purchase those items from a wholesaler. This is already required, it's current law. It's just a technical clarification.
Very good. Any questions on the amendments? Okay, hearing none. Yes,
Sorry. One
Senator
question
DeStefano.
on the amendment for line 1456. So just so I understand this, what we're saying is if I go in and I have dinner and I drink half a bottle of wine, we put the cork in, put it in a bottle, and then leave and consume it later. Because it's an and now, not an or.
Madam Chair, Senator DeStefano.
okay.
And I'm good with that. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding how it's written properly.
I will ask our staff attorney to respond.
Madam Chair, Senator DeStefano, so it will not allow that or change the rules around that. But basically what it is if you have a mixed beverage restaurant license, by paying the fee for that license, you will automatically be eligible for and have been considered to have paid for a license to also serve wine and beer for both on-premises consumption and off-premises consumption. It doesn't change any of the corking rules or anything, but you would be allowed to sell for on or off-premises consumption.
Okay. I would like to ask Travis Hill to come. Oh,
Yeah, and as staff comes up, I just wanted to point out that the House companion bill is being carried by Delegate Barry Knight. We worked out the exact same language between all these bills and Chairman Bulova as well, the Chairman of House General Laws.
So Madam Chair,
Very
at this
good.
point, even with the amendments provided, the same amendments, both bills will be exactly the same.
very good. Well, we have a process for dealing with anything. Mr. Hill, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Travis Hill, Virginia ABC CEO. I would also like to thank Senator McPike, Senator Reeves, and the rest of the subcommittee, Senator Mason, for their assistance in moving this forward. It has been a tremendous lift. I think you have a slide deck in front of you. I don't think it's able to be projected. I don't want to really belabor the point because I think it is unprecedented to kind of do a slide deck during session. But it is such a large bill. We wanted to give you some background and insight into where we went, although the two patrons did a great job of explaining it. This has been about a 3-year effort, really triggered by the growth of the industry with existing licenses and the type of businesses that are coming up. As Senator McPike referenced, we've probably had licenses increase by tenfold over the last 85 years, and it's become difficult for the regulator to be able to manage that, but it's also become difficult for our businesses to understand what licenses they need to apply for. So the request of us back in December of 2018 was to work with the subcommittee to propose a consolidation of licenses, explore the creation of a marketplace license which deals with these businesses that want to give away alcohol as part of an ancillary business. So their business isn't to sell alcohol, it's to provide a service, but they want to be able to put alcohol into the mix, if you will. And then also looking at the fees on how to support the regulation of the industry. In your slide deck, you have one slide that has a number of red columns showing different types of licenses. That kind of shows the current state, and depending on your business model, you could qualify for different types of licenses. The problem was you kind of had to understand what you wanted to do in order to go get the license that would fit that need. Sometimes we would have businesses apply for a license, get the license, think that they had what they needed, and then we would have to come back and say, you can't do that, you got the wrong license. And that's a very frustrating thing for a business to have to deal with. And so what we're trying to do is really consolidate these licenses so it's much more apparent what they need. When we undertook the study, we put together our own internal team, but we also worked a great deal with stakeholders. We had multiple meetings with them, their associations, but also large public meetings where we took comments and really tried to hear what they wanted to see in the industry and how to work with that. So what you're seeing here is a collaboration between us and our stakeholders. So the guiding principles of the legislation you see in front of you: no licensee loses privileges that they hold currently. The recommendations are based upon the 3-tier system, so this isn't something that's going to undo the 3-tier system. We're reducing the complexity of the licensing structure. The fee amounts that we set here are guided by the amount of work that we have put into regulating, so we're trying to fit the work to the fee. Fee revenue is only to be used to support regulatory services. The additional revenue produced in this legislation is reflected in the governor's introduced budget for regulatory services for the industry. And then we also capture kind of a regular cadence of how to adjust fees. These fees haven't been adjusted in a very long time, so they've kind of gotten out of step with the cost. So we wanted to put a concept in there that would address that. So high-level recommendations in the legislation: we're standardizing certain privileges so that when you apply for a license, you know the privileges you're getting. We're going to implement consistent qualification standards, creating that marketplace license I talked about, and then standardizing fees and renewal amounts for permits. Permits are another thing that we issue. They tend to be one-off type things, but they can, currently, they may not have a fee, they may not renew. It's hard to track where those things are in the process. So the legislation reduces the number of licenses by more than 50%. Most mixed beverage licenses will now include wine and beer. That was discussed by Senator DeStef in his question. There's no longer just an on-premise beer license. It would be both beer and wines. Generally, we find our licensees will serve both. They don't have to. That's up to them. We're going to have consistent sample and tasting sizes so that businesses, regardless of the license they have that consistent license or sampling size, so there's not any inconsistency there. And then we include some things as part of off-premise, like keg and delivery and tasting privileges that were individual permits that they had to know to apply for when they were trying to get that license. We also expand seating capacity tiers around the mixed beverage system or the mixed beverage license so that some of these larger conference centers and otherwise are paying a higher fee than your smaller mixed beverage restaurant, which wasn't the case previously. So one of the major concepts in this legislation is the marketplace license. And what we're proposing is to create a license where the business would come to ABC and apply based on their business model, and obtaining the license, they would be allowed to serve up to 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, in accordance with our code and regulations. They would need to be providing some other good or service and a personalized experience, be staffed with personnel with expertise in the goods or services, and then they would have to demonstrate they don't otherwise qualify for a license. So the types of licenses that already exist that would go into the marketplace classification would be things like day spas, art instruction studios, meal assembly kitchens, co-working establishments, and bespoke clothiers. We think this is a better approach than the current one-off where you all have to consider legislation that is very business model focused, where it might work for one type of business in that industry but not another. And then you have unfair competition, and you also have just some confusion. The examples I'll give, the day spa requires a massage therapist. So then we have our ABC agents deciding, okay, are you providing enough massage therapy? Are you giving enough appointments? Are you doing those types of things? Art instruction studio, what is art? That's not a politically charged question, right? We've had people who say, well, I teach culinary skills, knife skills, that is an art. So it's things like that where we're trying to understand how we can go about it. We think this is the better way, a broader approach to it. We would look, when we issue a marketplace license, how long folks spend in the establishment so that you don't have kind of the drink and dash type atmosphere. Also making sure these employees are properly trained, in that they would have to purchase their alcohol through a wholesaler as is required through the 3-tier system. We adjust the permit types. We have 17 permits. Currently, only 7 have a fee. All of these permits would have fees associated with them, and they would also be renewed, so we knew that people were continuing to use the permits. The other big part of this is the license fee reform. We are proposing fee increases of about $2.5 million. That is directly dedicated to enforcement and regulation of the industry. It's something that our industry stakeholders have asked for. They would go to fund new positions, primarily non-sworn positions that would be involved in investigations, forensic investigations. We're finding more kind of the business practice side needs to be examined, and we would focus on that with these additional funds. So with that, that was the sprint through this legislation. Happy to take questions on the process or any particular proposals, but also thank David May, who's done a tremendous amount of work getting these ideas into the language in the code and making them all work together. Also want to express my thanks to the stakeholders who were very collaborative in moving the proposal forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Committee members, do you have any questions?
Madam Chairman.
Senator McDougall.
Travis, just realized that fees are increasing. Are there any fees that are increasing in excess of what you are spending for enforcement in any area?
No, that's not our intent. What we're looking at is making sure that we can add additional resources to the enforcement capabilities to regulate the industry.
Madam Chairman?
Senator McDougall.
My question was not about your intent, but what you actually did in the legislation. This is pretty omnibus. Are there any fees that are increase of the cost for you to provide the service or enforcement?
No. No, sir. I don't believe so.
I have a follow-up question. Mr. Hill, there's language in the bill, I believe, that says the dollars collected through the fees will actually go for enforcement and management, I believe.
It's not in this legislation. It's in the budget language that appropriates the additional funds generated by these fees.
So there is a stated public
I would also
strategy. Go ahead. Senator, Mr. Hill, did you have something else? Okay. Okay, we have heard the presentation. Many people were part of this process. We are not accepting public comment on this because you've had over 1.5 years of meetings with a great deal of public comment. I will ask the committee what their expectation is on. Is there a motion? Do you have? Would you? Okay, hold on one sec. Senator Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have a question of Mr. Hill. First of all, I can tell that a great deal of work went into this 58-page, 3,500-line bill, and I appreciate all the stakeholders' work on it. Just a couple of questions. as I was looking through these tiered structure and the new fees, just slightly curious how you arrived at the new fees. For example, Commercial Lifestyle Center is $300. The MP Ports Restaurant is $10.50. There's the Gourmet Brewing Shop is $320. Quickly or succinctly, can you tell me how you came up with these various fees?
What we did is we looked at what we thought we needed to regulate additional resources, and that's where we came up with the $2.5 million approximately. We then looked at the level of effort we dedicated to all these different types of licenses and tried to allocate that additional revenue across those license types based upon the amount of work that was involved in each one.
All right. Thank you. Madam Chair, one final question.
Senator Morrissey.
With regard to the stakeholders, the Virginia Restaurant Association is all on board. I'm looking for a thumbs up from somebody. We haven't heard from them, and I recognize I'm a new member, but are they all on board?
I'm not comfortable speaking for them. They could show their thumb or they can come forward.
Senator Morrissey, there were many hearings that the subcommittee held. So I expect the interest groups, for the most part, are at least willing to accept this. Not everybody likes every piece of this legislation, but my understanding is the majority of stakeholders are comfortable or willing to move forward with this.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. In fact, the line amendments were additional feedback. I've had no opposition coming by the office to suggest other alternatives to this, because this really is the existing. We are not removing any authority from anybody. We're actually consolidating and simplifying the structure. And so I think the feedback from those stakeholders has been positive.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there a motion on the bill? This is Senate Bill 389.
Make the motion, move the bill.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. You have made a motion to report the bill with the amendments, and we also have to refer this bill to finance.
Right.
That's the motion before us. Is the seconder fine?
Yes.
Okay. Will the clerk please open the roll?
Ayes 15, no 0.
Thank you, and thank you for your hard work. Senator Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senate Bill 91 was re-referred to judiciary, so you're going to talk about 495?
Senate Bill 495, it
Thank
does
you.
require an amendment. David May, I think, has an amendment to put a sunset clause on it. What this bill does, it adds jewelry stores to the list of places that can have a license to give, not sell, no more than 2 glasses of beer or 2 glasses of wine, or 1 glass of beer and 1 glass of wine to customers while they're buying jewelry. That sounds like a good idea, huh? That's all it does. That's all it does.
Senator Edwards, we just heard an omnibus bill, so there's an option here. Your bill could be a standalone, or it could be rolled into the omnibus bill, but if it's rolled into the omnibus bill, I don't believe it will take effect until 2021. Is that correct, Mr. May?
Madam Chair, that would be correct. So to explain a little bit further, if it were per se rolled into the omnibus bill, what would happen would be the jewelry store license would effectively disappear, because there is, which Mr. Hill spoke about, there's a marketplace license in the omnibus bill that would allow a business like a jewelry store to apply for a marketplace license and serve complimentary wine and beer. So that's one option, but as you pointed out, they would not be able to operate for the next year because the omnibus bill would not take effect until July 1st of 2021, which is why we have a possible amendment. If you would like for me to go through.
Please present the amendment.
Madam Chair, so there would be one line amendment, and I'll read you the provisions of it, and then I'll explain it. It would be after line 721, we would insert a second enactment clause that read, the provisions of this act shall expire upon the effective date of an act of assembly passed by the 2020 session of the General Assembly, the omnibus bill, that creates a marketplace license that allows persons operating a business enterprise for which the primary function is not the sale of alcoholic beverages to serve complimentary wine or beer to bona fide customers. So basically what it does is it would allow this jewelry store license to be created in the code, operate for the next year until the omnibus becomes effective, and then when the omnibus kicked in and this store was eligible to apply for a marketplace license, the jewelry store license would disappear.
Madam Chair,
So-
I'd move the line amendment.
Thank you. Is there unanimous consent in accepting the amendment? I don't need a voice vote for the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. Anybody opposed? The amendment's been accepted. So now the bill's before us as amended.
Madam Chairman?
Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Cosgrove.
Madam Chairman, I'd just like to advise the committee, this is an extraordinarily dangerous bill. The reason it's a dangerous bill is because I've been the victim of this type of thing. When you go to the islands like, St. Thomas or St. Martin, you go in there, they say, come on in. Hey, mister, you want a beer? You want wines? And, just stay over there, keep doing the beer and the wine. Your wife goes, honey, isn't this pretty? You sure, honey? Just telling you. Thank you.
We have to be strong. The bill is before us as amended. Is there a motion?
As amended.
Okay, motion was moved to report the bill as amended, and there's a second from Senator Reeves. The clerk, open the roll, please.
Ayes 14, noes 1.
Thank you, Senator Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Suderline.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got two bills on the docket. I don't know which one you'd prefer first. One deals with jails and the other deals with IEPs.
How about the IEP one? That's
Okay.
Senate Bill 214.
Yes, ma'am. So Senate Bill 214 is a much shorter read than the bills you've seen earlier today. The relevant language is in lines 21 through 24. You see there that if it's a young person between the age of 17 and a half and 21 years of age that has an IEP, the guardian ad litem shall review the IEP and include the results in the report that's required by this. There's nothing currently prohibiting this, and I think that it's frequently done. But when we were having conversations at the Joint Commission on Healthcare, actually in this room during the summer, it was something that was suggested that we should require that the IEP be reviewed. The IEP is something that was created after careful consultation with the parents or legal guardians, teachers, and tax dollars paid for that development throughout. And we just think that it's something that we spent taxpayer money on, and when we're making a decision about these young people, it's something that we should include there for them as well.
It's a very straightforward bill. Do you have speakers or?
I don't think anyone
Okay.
else. It's something that we endorsed at JCHC, and I think you'll see some larger bills that have a lot of these related components as well.
Madam Chair.
Sounds like a very good bill. Senator Reeves?
Just a question. Senator Suderline, why the 17? I understand the 21, but why isn't it younger possibly? 17 is typically a junior or senior in high school?
Well, it's because the thought was these are folks that are no longer in school.
That are popped out for
Yeah,
whatever.
and so
Okay.
if you're supposed to be in school and you're 16, some folks aren't when they're 17, and most folks aren't when they're 19, 20, or 21. and we just think that the information is still relevant.
Thank you. The bill is before us. There were no amendments. I would like a motion.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made to report the bill, and it's been seconded. Will the clerk please open the roll?
Ayes 15, no 0.
Your bill reports.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If you'd like, now I do Senate Bill 215.
215.
This is another pretty straightforward bill. I encourage the committee to look at lines 43 through 47 of the bill, and that is that what it does is it requires an annual report summarizing the reviews of deaths that occur in jails across the Commonwealth. We have 59 local and regional jails across the Commonwealth, and there's a wide variety of reasons that people find themselves in jail. Very different level of offenses. But something that's been disturbing is, if you have any population of people anywhere, some people will naturally come to the end of their life, but it appears that sometimes it seems to happen disproportionately to certain folks in certain places. And so with this bill, which wasn't an idea I just came up with, it was something that the JLARC suggested, which is we ought to have a thorough analysis of what's happening in regards to these jail deaths across the Commonwealth. Hopefully we find out why some places seem to have, they have an improbably high number, and see what they might be able to do to no longer have that number, because every time that the statistic is higher represents the loss of a Virginian's life. And we certainly want folks that are in jail to feel the consequences of what they did, but we do not want it to be death penalty. And so just trying to figure out, there's some places, I think, we all know in different parts of the Commonwealth that have higher numbers and concern a lot of us, and this is what we want to see why and what we can do to change that. So.
Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Is there questions? Yes, Senator Serville.
Senator, I've had some situations with both clients and or other people I've been aware of who've had situations occur in jail where they not end up dead, but effectively dead, either due to suicide attempts or otherwise. And I was just curious whether there was any discussion as part of this as to whether or not using death as the standard for an investigation was broad enough. I know, for example, in several of the systems in Northern Virginia with the opiate crisis, we've had a lot of people coming in severe crisis. They get put in jail, they start going through the DTs, can't handle it, and personally, I had a client who tried to hang himself in jail after he put the jail on notice that was going on, and now he's basically in a bed the rest of his life and completely unresponsive. And so just wondering, as part of those discussions, whether there was any talk about whether or not death was necessarily the right standard to use to trigger a possible board investigation.
So the report itself that JLARC did was looking at jail deaths, and my original interest in seeking out any resources we had throughout the Commonwealth on the subject was specifically jail deaths in the western part of the Commonwealth that were higher than the numbers should suggest. And so that's why I took that angle. I think that what you're suggesting is certainly something to look at. I'd like to get this done, and that might be a good broadening approach going forward. Perhaps if what we find from this, we might find more from there, because I have a feeling that a lot of the folks that find themselves in that situation, probably just a few minutes or an hour different than the folks subject to the study.
I think Secretary Moran just stepped out of his chair and may have a comment on this. Secretary Moran?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the Board of Corrections is a fairly new board that is reviewing jail death investigations. JLARC just did a really comprehensive study, very complimentary of the board. Senator Deeds is carrying an administration bill as a result of that JLARC report, and one of the components, I think, reflects Senator Sutherland's bill that calls for an annual report, which we agree that we should have an annual report of its findings. And so the bill, we have no, I think would support the bill, but we've worked with Senator Deeds to have an omnibus bill. So I just wanted to inform the committee of that activity.
Madam Chairman, I have a question for the Secretary.
Senator Servo?
Secretary Moran, you know, the statute that I read in front of me here just simply, it's permissive. It just says the board has the power to review certain things. I mean, do you see any downside of broadening it to say that the board shall have the power to review the death or any serious injury of any inmate? It doesn't require them to do it. It would just give them the option to do it if they choose to do it or vote to do it. I mean, do you see any downside of if we were to make an amendment like that?
Senator Servo, my only concern would be if you're going to expand the universe in which they have the opportunity to conduct reviews, resources would need to be applied to the board, and that is a part of Senator Deeds and the governor's budget to support Senator Deeds' bill. So if you're going to expand it to other, the policy, I would agree with you. I recognize that need, but I don't know if we have addressed the resources necessary for additional investigators.
Madam Chairman, further question?
Senator Servo?
So, Secretary, wouldn't it be true, though, that if the board doesn't have the resources, they just wouldn't vote to conduct an investigation into that additional class of cases? I mean, but they would still have the authority to do it if they have to. I mean,
and the question would be, why didn't you investigate that case? So I'd rather, this is, by the way, this is a board that's all appointed by the governor. They volunteer. There's no compensation. They've been doing tremendous work. I just, further discussion with respect to putting that on this board, because I would anticipate the question would be, well, you have the authority. Why didn't you investigate that?
I could see that too. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Morrissey, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question of the patron of the bill, Senator Sutherland.
Yes, Senator Morrissey.
First of all, Senator Servo took the wind out of my first sail. I think that I thank you for this bill, but when you use verbiage that the board shall have the power, I think the bill becomes just toothless. There's no requirement, no mandate, no pressure to do that. That's my first comment. The second one is, how do you define local correctional facility in line 14?
Well, first, I would just point out that its existing statute lines 13 through 42.
I understand that.
So your thoughts on that aren't a disagreement with me. It's a disagreement with our predecessors.
Maybe, Madam Chair.
Senator Morrissey.
Maybe counsel for the committee can explain the difference, local correctional facility versus DOC facility versus regional facility, like the Riverside Regional Jail. Does this cover all jails in the Commonwealth, or is this narrowing it down to a certain population of jails that we might want to expand?
Madam Chair, Senator Morrissey, I don't know if the Secretary wants to comment at all. I don't want to misconstrue the bill, but it's my belief that this is limited to local correctional facilities, so it would not include any of your state correctional facilities.
Would it include, Madam Chair?
Senator Morrissey.
Would it include the Riverside Regional Jail?
Yes, it would.
And the final question, is there a distinction between for-profit jails and not-for-profits? And would this bill cover for-profit jails in the Commonwealth?
So, is that directed at me, Madam Chair?
I think it's directed to staff.
Madam Chair, Senator Morrissey, I'm not sure that we have any. don't think we have any.
In Warsaw, we do.
Oh,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
thank you. Is there, Senator Reeves, you mentioned that there is a board that sort of is looking at all of these. There's a commission looking at this issue?
Madam Chair, I would just say I serve with the secretary on the Offender Population Forecast Committee that does a lot of that work with Meredith from the Supreme Court. And I don't know if this mandated report is something that maybe Mr. Secretary might want to look at putting that over into Offender Population Forecast rather than the burden on that volunteer board that they have. But I'm not sure on the reorganization on how they're looking at that. My only comment would be that if there's a bigger bill coming, rather than shoot something out of the committee now to get it going, that quite possibly no intent to the patron, but we might want it to go by for a day to give them the opportunity to talk to Senator Deeds and look and see comprehensively how we work the inner workings, so we just don't have a bill out there and then in conflict, or possibly just an addendum, so we clean the code. That would be mine.
Is that a motion to move that the bill go by for the day? And oh, I apologize. You didn't come up on my, yes, Senator Sproul.
Question to the Mr. Secretary.
Yes, sir.
No, you're not Mr. Secretary, not you.
Oh, I thought you said senator.
No.
Sorry. No, you're right. I'm not a member of the administration.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, I like his bill, so the question is, I'm hearing what you said about Senator Creed Dees. I want to support this bill. Would that be a problem by supporting this bill now, or should we wait?
I would only say that Senator Deeds' bill is more comprehensive. This is a component of his bill, so, and with all the questions that have generated, you might want, I humbly suggest you might want to take a look at Senator Deeds' bill, and maybe we have one omnibus bill with respect to the Board of Corrections, but we are supportive of the transparency in publishing the annual findings of the work of this board. We're very proud of what the board is doing. So in terms of his concept, we're supportive. I actually haven't, I've just been listening to the concern. I just wanted to try to provide you additional information with respect to the Board of Corrections.
Thank you so much.
I think it would be helpful if you, as the patron of this bill, Senator Suderline, did have a conversation with Senator Deeds and sort of ensure that your intent, if not your exact language, is incorporated into Senator Deeds' bill. I believe the only pathway forward for that would be to pass this bill by for the day, and which means it would, if necessary, come back to us next week. Are you amenable to that? We're talking about a motion to that effect.
I mean, I think that, as my understanding, the bills are in conflict, and so I don't know if there's any issue with having the two separate bills, but whatever you think is best, it's your responsibility.
Madam Chair, I would make the motion to pass the bill by temporarily, or pass the bill by for the day, to allow Senator Suderline the opportunity to see if they can fold it in. If they can't, we've heard the bill, so I don't think it would take much time to get it through the committee.
Okay, a motion is before us. Is there a second? There's a second? Okay. Without objection, we will pass the bill by for the day. Thank you. Okay, let me go back. Senator Eben.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, and it's nice to see some new faces up there on the committee. Those that were here last year, though, will remember, I should say this is Senate Bill 20. This legislation, which has to deal with youth who are housed in a correctional facility like the Shenandoah Valley Regional Detention Center for Youth Detention Center, but under a federal contract. So what the bill does is it directs the Department of Juvenile Justice to develop regulations for minors who are held under a federal contract who have not been ordered into the detention center from a Virginia court. And these kids have been coming there from the Federal Office of Refugee Resettlement. So it addresses them putting in regulations that would address some holistic concerns and some specific concerns that came out of specific incidences and a report that was generated afterwards. It's different than last year's version in that it directs the Board of Juvenile Justice to work with the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Service to create the guidelines. And I have a constituent who, you may remember from last year, read through hundreds of pages of federal and state regulations that were helpful with us in coming up with this. Sorry she couldn't be here this morning. But this was originated from, the idea came from the allegations, shocking allegations, of practices at Shenandoah Valley Juvenile Justice Center, which included immigrant youth who were allegedly beaten while stripped to chairs, locked up for long periods in solitary confinement, left nude and shivering in concrete cells. And these kids are not criminals. Many of them were fleeing gang violence. Some of them may have been human trafficked into the country. They need to be reflected if we're going to have these federal kids in our detention centers. We need to realize that they have undergone extreme trauma, possible mental illness inflicted on that due to the circumstance. They require different care than those convicted of crimes, and they're essentially foster youth, but we don't put other foster youth into a detention center. So just to move along, I'll say many of the requirements in this bill came from Secretary Moran's report, I will just mention in the bill, from the bill, you'll notice it asks for the regulations to include things like avoiding isolation, training the staff in cognitive behavioral interventions, trauma-informed care, cultural background implications, bilingual staff, which is important so you can understand what you're supposed to do or what's happening to you, standards for video footage related to reported incidents, because in one of the incidents we heard originally, the video was destroyed. So last year we heard this, it failed on a tie vote, a bipartisan tie vote, and I'm hoping the committee will move forward this year.
Thank you, Senator Eben. Are there any questions on the part of committee members?
Madam Chair, I just would like to hear from DOC to see their thoughts on the bill and the order.
Okay, there's a representative from the Department of Corrections.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Kristen Peterson. I actually represent the Department of Juvenile Justice. And so this bill, Senator Eben's bill, Senator Eben has correctly explained the distinction between the current regulations that are in place and what he'd like to see pursuant to his legislation. The Board of Juvenile Justice is responsible currently for promulgating regulations, and the department is not currently, the department is not, we are required to certify these facilities, but we are not operating these facilities currently. And so our Board of Juvenile Justice promulgates the regulations that relate to these specific facilities. And so there are not currently separate regulations in place for these juveniles who are in these federal programs. We have regulations in place, or I should say the board has regulations in place that are applicable to all of the residents in the juvenile detention centers. And as Senator Eben has mentioned, there are some areas of the regulation that do not meet the requirements that he set out in his legislation.
So the bottom line is you can apply the set of regulations you have to these federally contracted institutions. It should not be a problem.
Madam Chair, that's correct. The regulations that are currently in place are applicable to all of the juvenile detention centers and to the staff in the juvenile detention centers. So those regulations do apply to the federal kids. There are not a separate set of regulations currently in place that are applicable to those residents who are under federal custody.
But what this bill does is ensures that it applies, because there was some legal question last year.
What the legislation does is it requires our board to promulgate a separate set of regulations that would be applicable specifically to these youth. And it requires specific additional provisions that we don't currently have in place in our regulations.
Madam Chair.
I think that might be appropriate. Yes, Senator Reeves.
And is that something that your board can absorb in their budgetary concerns to promulgate this new regulation? It obviously takes manpower and hours, so is that absorbed through the board, or is there a budget amendment that needed?
Madam Chair, Senator Reeves, the board is not expected to absorb any additional costs in establishing these regulations.
Okay.
Okay, so no fiscal impact. The bill is before us. I would like a motion.
Madam Chairman,
Senator McDougal.
I had questions specifically about lines 3 and 4. Well, I guess they're lines 21 and 22. It's items 3 and 4. Requirements for an appropriate number of bilingual staff. Am I to assume that when you wrote that, you're saying that there's only one additional language than English of individuals that are spoken?
No, I haven't done a census of who exactly are in the kids. That's my anticipation, but I don't want to say without looking at their population that it's only one language. But keep in mind, these federal youth are contracted for, so they get charged what it costs to care for them. And in Yolo County, California, the ACLU is suing the only other facility like this in the country, to my knowledge, for under threat of lawsuit for certain things like this.
Madam Chairman?
Senator McDougal.
So if somebody had an obscure dialect of Chinese that was in a facility, then we would be out of compliance if we didn't also have a staff member that had that same dialect bilingual ability based under what this...
The Office of Refugee Resettlement, in my mind, would have to make a decision whether they wanted to send them to this facility, which is not, the kids are not, whether they want to send them there with them not being able to know why you're here, what's going to happen, this is when we do school, you can learn English, whatever, or whether they want to risk the threat of lawsuit, whether we would. Yeah, but we have no regulation whatsoever on that. So if you allow the Department of Juvenile Justice to make a regulation, they could figure it out. And I went there and visited with them last year, and they declined to take action.
Madam Chairman.
Senator McDougal.
On line number 22, so I guess it's lines 4, it says to ensure that the youth detained understand their rights and responsibilities. What rights are you referring to?
Well, when you're in a secure, it could be to an attorney or something if you have some kind of legal issue. You do have a legal issue if you're incarcerated, even though you're just a refugee youth.
Well, Madam Chairman.
Senator McDougal.
So you're saying that the Commonwealth of Virginia, through the Department of Juvenile Justice, would have to articulate to somebody what their rights are in relationship to a different entity of government, because it's not the right you just articulated is not to the Commonwealth, it's to the federal government.
Yeah. I think we're getting a bit in the weeds, but you as an attorney and them as the Board of Juvenile Justice know a little bit better than me, but I don't think that we should be taking kids under a federal contract or certifying the facility as being able to take them under a contract, because this is not Virginia's contract, it's the Shenandoah Valley Youth Detention Center, under my understanding, their contract, that we should not accept them from Shenandoah Valley Youth Detention Center or certify the center to accept those children without these items 1 through 7. Now, it says such regulations shall establish, and you brought up that particular one, so yes.
I guess I will ask the patron. My understanding is, though, that the Board of Juvenile Justice would actually take your bill and flesh it out into regulations. So these are not that prescriptive. They're more
general
principles.
Yeah, they're principles that we do want to see included, and will we think make a more fair environment, and especially consider these kids are not like the other kids in the facility. They're not kids who've been convicted of a crime.
Okay. I don't see anybody lining up behind you to speak, so I will ask the committee what their preference is on this bill.
I move the report, Madam Chairman.
Motion has been made to report. There's a second. Senator DeSteff.
I'm not
sure if my button's working properly, but I've been hitting wait to speak, so I guess it's not properly.
Mine, I didn't always have my button pushed either.
And if I may, Madam Chair, I have a couple of quick questions that there's a couple of things I want to make sure I understand properly in here. And if I may ask the Senator Eben a couple of
Is
questions.
your mic on?
It is on. So, Madam Chair, if I may, Senator Eben, on the bilingual staff, I guess we've answered the question I had on that with what languages or how are we going to determine how many languages? But when we're saying we're referring to a full-time employee, correct?
I assume so, and I assume it would just be Spanish, but I didn't want to make that final conclusion without knowing the origin of the kids.
Madam Chair, if I may, we have Somalian refugees, we have refugees from all over the world, so I just wanted to make sure that we've not truly clarified what languages, and if we're saying they have to have a full-time employee that knows all languages from all the refugees we're actually accepting, then I have a bit of a concern with that. But I also just want to make sure I understand and am clear with some of the terms in here. When we say staff, we are referring to a full-time employee by the center. And then on culturally relevant programs, if you can explain to me what culturally relevant programs are. And I agree with a lot of the other things you have in here, but cultural background implications are another term that I'm not real familiar with, and I'm having a hard time understanding the definition of as it relates to the total concept here, because just having knowledge of, if we're talking about refugees, culturally relevant programs or cultural background implications, even our federal government agencies have hundreds of people who study the cultural background and implications of what certain gestures mean, what certain tattoos mean, what certain things mean. They have hundreds of people discussing this and who have to understand this and researching this. And this could be, if we're saying that we're going to do this, I want to better understand that.
Okay. So first off, these, just in terms of cost or what this could lead to if you have a Somalian refugee, these are ones that have been contracted for, so the person who's paying the contract would pay the cost that's appropriate. But in terms of communications and stuff, you wouldn't accept them if you can't communicate with them. I mean, I think that's an obvious. Culturally relevant programs, these are kids who are 10 to 17 years old. So if you want to teach them about U.S. culture in a way that they'll understand from their own culture, or I think you brought up hand gestures or something.
Hand gestures, there's a lot of religious things, and there's other government agencies who have hundreds of people who literally research this to make sure, as whether diplomat or that we don't offend anybody around the world by mistakes of gestures or when we walk through the country. And if I may back up to your other statement, Madam Chair, you said that they shouldn't accept them if they can't communicate with them, but the whole premise of this bill was that you had been there and people were mistreated based on they couldn't be understood or they couldn't be communicated with. So they're already accepting refugees from other countries that they can't communicate with.
Madam Chair.
I think, Senator Steff, I think you've made your point. So, Senator Eben, do you have any additional information to add other than this is a Section 1 bill?
Yeah, it's a Section 1 bill. It's for regulation, and the idea is that the board, will figure this out. Not that we have to figure out today how many cultures there are and what degree of cultural program there'll be. The idea is that they're going to look at this, the cultural portion. The other portions that were not kind of singled out, I think are more straightforward, but I think it's up to the board. It's really about offering care and humane treatment.
There's a motion before us. Does anybody want to speak to the motion? Okay. The motion is to report, and there was a second. I will ask the clerk to open the roll.
Ayes 10, noes 5.
Your
members of
bill
the committee.
reports. Okay. Request to present Senator Bell. Is Senator Bell here? Senator Bell. Okay.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
This is for SB 493.
I think we will have to refer that to finance, but we can hear the content and make some judgment on the policy, and then your bill will be re-referred to finance. Okay.
Madam Chair, I would say this is a bill the governor spoke about, and I believe it is addressed in the governor's budget. But certainly I understand the referral, but
Okay.
we can have the administration speak to that. This bill would create a mechanism for the Virginia Patrol Board to consider release for offenders who are permanently incapacitated, terminally ill, they pose no threat for public safety. Basically, if we look at laws around the country, Virginia has some of the most strict laws in this case. Caring for terminally ill inmates is very expensive. The cost is often more than double or triple what it would be if they were released. And cost is also difficult when someone is, or care is difficult when someone is incarcerated. At this point, this would allow currently terminally ill offenders have no mechanism for consideration for release unless they're over the age of 60 or committed their offense before the abolishment of parole in 1995. I want to reference a recent JLARC study which actually focused on the cost and the rising cost. That not only is it's very expensive, but it continues to go up percentage-wise. Inmate health care specifically noted that we have one of the most restrictive compassionate release policies in the nation. And one of the recommendations to address this is to encourage the General Assembly to consider adopting legislation which would allow inmates with serious illnesses to petition the Patrol Board for release. Specifically, JLARC recommended extending the time for terminally ill diagnosis from 3 to 12 months so an inmate could be considered for release. One of the points I would make is obviously my heart goes out to victims and don't want to do anything to further victimize them by releasing someone who's committed a crime or caused a harm. The point would be justice includes mercy, in my opinion. And in this case, we've got a terminally ill person, and the parole board has the ability to consider, doesn't mean they would always grant, but consider it if it's in the best interest of the Commonwealth to reduce cost, and also the most compassionate thing to do for someone who is terminally ill, and also would relieve a tremendous, not just cost, but burden to the health system in our prisons. With that, Madam Chair, be happy to answer any questions. I do know that the administration has folks here who want to speak to this.
Madam Chair.
Okay, very good. Who has? Senator Servo.
First of all, I have a question for council. Council, am I correct that this is the bill we passed last year, 13-2 out of this committee? It was Senator Saslaw's bill, I believe.
Madam Chair, Senator Servo, I would have to check to make sure that they align correctly, but I believe you are correct.
Okay, thank you. Question for the patron.
Senator Servo.
Senator Bell, am I correct that this bill does not require anybody to release anyone? It simply gives the parole board the option to release someone should they look at the facts and circumstances and determine that given the person's illness or condition, they pose no risk to the public. And there, I think, would also be an opportunity for input by victims and others in that process.
Madam Chair, that is correct. And I would also add that I have spoken to some advocates today for victims, and we'll continue to confer to them if this bill were to progress, because obviously I'm very sensitive to their needs. But to your point, absolutely right. And Madam Chair, one other thing I would want to add, specifically in the governor's submitted budget, Governor Northam included $39,023 for one additional part-time parole examiner, which would help to ease the burden with additional caseload that's anticipated.
Madam Chair, additional question.
Senator Servo.
Senator Bell, it's my recollection that when Secretary Moran spoke to us last year in committee, I asked him how much money this would save or how much money the government spends providing housing and health care to these individuals. My recollection was that it's $27 million per year that we could potentially save if we were to parole these people, obviously net the cost of the one person to help process these things. Do those numbers sound roughly correct to you?
Actually, I'll ask I'm going to use the phone a friend since the secretary is right back here. I love to misquote the secretary, but I would rather have him come up and speak.
Secretary Moran, if you want to respond to some of these questions as well, or?
This is a bill that we strongly support, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It is not unfamiliar with it. We did present this bill last year in light of the JLARC report. At that time, medical costs to DOC amounted to 17% of their budget. A more recent House Appropriations staff estimate pegs it at 20%. As you all know, parole was limited effective January 1, 1995. What this bill represents is increasing a small population, particularly those that are ill, that no longer pose a public safety risk to the Commonwealth. And as has been noted by Senator Bell, this merely provides discretion to the parole board and doesn't release anyone, but they will need to review this case, and the money provides for a home health home plan, so they're not released to the street. They're released to a home health plan.
Right.
There's a victim services group.
Right.
That is victim services are provided, and so the estimate with respect specifically to Senator Serville's, those were the numbers, and those numbers last year, and I would tell you they've only increased since that time.
Senator Hanger, did you have your?
Chair, I had a question and a comment.
You've got the floor.
Thank you. As I read this, and actually, I guess it was about 20 years ago, I carried the statute for this underlying statute here for geriatric release, and have, if anything, have been really disappointed in the parole board in the fact that they don't use this very much. I'm hoping we, with this bill and maybe some other things, we can do some things to encourage them to use it more frequently. Senator Bell, what I'm seeing here is basically a lot of the verbiage is you just striking through and adding is just restating the original statute, but then you're adding a provision for permanently disabled and terminally ill. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, that is correct.
Okay, and then, Madam Chair?
Yes.
I would relate that I've had an experience with the governor's office just this past year where there was a terminally ill person that was a relative of someone in my district, and I had to work through the governor's office to try to get them out. The prognosis was they were going to die within 4 months. Initially, we had some issues with that. I asked the governor's office to go ahead and whatever they do, commute the sentence or whatever to get him out. And the regulation or the policy they had in place at that time was they had to be within the death certified by a doctor within 3 months. And the doctor said he was going to die within 4 months. Well, we've been working on it 2 months, so we had to go back and get another statement from a doctor. Essentially, it appeared to so that would die. So the 12 months, I think, is a good thing, so that you give a little more latitude there to the governor. So, Madam Chair, I certainly support the underlying intent of the bill, but we almost need to do something with the parole board to get them to get some of these folks out and off of the medical care, because actually it saved us money. I mean, the fellow was eligible for Medicaid and went home to die, and he did die about 2 months later.
Madam Chair, I would just add to that comment, frankly, this is an issue here in Virginia, but it's an issue because this is often not used across the country. And frankly, it would save a tremendous amount. The other issue is, again, not to diminish the victims of whatever crime brought the person to incarceration, but certainly the families of that victim, as in your case, have suffered as well. And at the end of life, doing this compassionate release, if it's appropriate, gives that person a chance to make amends to their family, which I think is also very important.
I think this bill is very straightforward and has a lot of positive public benefits. The bill is before us.
Madam Chairman?
Madam Chair. Senator McDougall.
My question is, and I agree with Senator Bell and Senator Hanger about the terminal ill provision and us giving more flexibility. My question, and we've not talked about this part, is the permanently physically disabled, because it does if I'm reading that definition right, if you had hearing loss in your ear, you would be permanently physically disabled, or if you lost a toe, you would be permanently physically disabled. So the terminally ill provisions, I'm 100% agreement, and I think there's universal, but the permanently physical disabled seems to be not consistent with everything else that's been articulated today, and wondered why the definition that's there is not more restrictive to somebody that disability is actually severe, or it is not just permanent, but it's means that they are not able to function.
Madam Chair, I would like the Secretary to speak to this, but first I'll give my answer. We crafted this, again, we looked at best practices in other states who've used this, and to have the net wide enough to capture conditions that would meet sufficient consideration, we included the injured and chronic conditions. But I would answer to your point, the terminally ill and the timeline, I think, is the critical trigger. And again, it's consideration. A parole board would not have to grant, and I would argue in a case where it was just hearing loss or minor issues that they would not grant. These are trusted agents. They have a tremendous responsibility, and I would trust them to use the right thing and not grant it if it was just a minor case.
I have a question for council. I would not interpret permanently physically disabled to mean if I were missing a toe. There is a definition here in the statute. Is that a common definition? And would this definition this would have to be interpreted, I would expect, by a board?
Madam Chair, I would agree. It probably does leave some room here for interpretation. I will note that I don't think this is the typical definition that we use for a person with a disability. But those other definitions are used in different contexts, specifically as far as people who are eligible for services. Traditionally, we tie disability language to an impairment that interferes with one or more daily and major life activities. That's some common boilerplate language that we use for disability. So this doesn't exactly align with all of our definitions, but like I said, it is used in a different context, which I assume is the justification for the different definition.
Madam Chairman.
Senator Servo.
Speaking to the bill. First of all, I don't have a problem with the definition. I think the thing we have to remember here is we're giving the parole board the discretion, and they get to exercise the discretion. And I would think that a fairly minor physical disability, or as the bill is worded, a fairly minor permanent and irreversible physical disability is not something they would grant parole for if it was truly minor. And secondly, I just wanted to note for the committee, just so they didn't feel like I was trying to mislead them, the bill that passed last year, 13-2, had that language struck from the bill at the request, I believe, of the Virginia Commonwealth Attorneys Association, which they're not here today, and they've been reconstituted. And I know they had their meeting yesterday to discuss their bills, and so their absence, I would assume, is intentional. So perhaps they now don't have the problem with the bill that they used to. But I just wanted to make sure the committee didn't think I was trying to tell them that this is the bill they all voted for last year, except for one person who's still here.
All right, we appreciate your point. Senator Sproul.
I'm kind of agreeing with the senator to my left, because the question is that if you do that, then I want to know, am I permanently disabled myself? Madam Chairman, you put me on this side of the desk because of my hearing problem, my speech problem. So I'm here, so does that mean that if I was incarcerated, so the problem I have now, does that mean you can let me out? See, that's so, but that's my question.
I'm going to address the question to Secretary Moran. Senator Sproul's question?
So my question was, I heard what he's saying, so the problem I have right now, I'm on this side, sitting between two fine Republicans. It's because of my hearing, what have you, and I have to keep asking questions. So if I was incarcerated, so then I am permanent that way. So if I was incarcerated and I have a permanent problem of hearing, does that mean that because I have that and it's permanent, so you can let me out?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, no, not unless you no longer present a public safety risk. All you do is become eligible. The gentleman to your left, Senator Hanger, mentioned geriatric release he doesn't think it's as robust as it should be. All this does is make individuals eligible. It does not let anyone out of the prison gates, or it just allows the parole board to consider them for parole. So not only would the disability have to be permanent, and this is actually out of language out of the First Step Act, that's I believe where the language was borrowed from. So not only would you have to meet the permanently physically disabled criteria, but then you'd have to meet all the other criteria that the parole board uses to make those decisions with respect to parole.
Madam Chair.
Okay, I'm going to take two more senators in their comments because we do have to move along. Senator Cosgrove and then Senator DeSteffe.
Thank you.
And I apologize, but we do have an agenda that we have to get through. Senator Cosgrove.
Senator Bell, this may be something the Secretary needs to answer, but references have been made to somebody who is no longer a threat to society or the community, right? How do you figure that one out? If he can walk or she can walk and pull the trigger?
I think there's many different criteria they would use. Obviously, it would be the record of the inmate during their period of incarceration, whether they've had any kind of incidents, violent behaviors, adverse reactions, et cetera. And then it would also be a number of other checks that a normal parole board would go through, in addition to the physical issues. But the bottom line is, if we look at the around the country, again, this hasn't been used very often, but the folks who are really driving the high medical bills and have a terminal diagnosis within 12 months, many of these people are bedridden, and I think that is the physical limitations that their condition leads to this determination. Mr. Secretary, you want to add anything?
But I don't think it's going to.
Madam Chair, not to continue to belabor this point,
yeah.
but the chair of the parole board is here, Adrienne Bennett. She has policies with respect to how they would interpret permanently physically disabled. If you want to hear from her, but it would address.
Well, that may be helpful. I didn't realize she was in the audience. Perhaps, I mean, I know the senators are some senators are uncomfortable because it's open to interpretation, but sometimes that is the better policy because experts who have more information and can balance various things would be in the position of making the determination. You're welcome to speak.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. I'm Adrienne Bennett, Chairwoman of the Virginia Parole Board, and have been for the past 3 years. And Senator Hanger, I do hope to talk to you about your concerns with regard to the geriatric population and offer you an explanation and maybe some solutions as well. I want to point out, and I don't know that it was made clear last year, the Parole Board reviews all the medical clemency cases already for the governor's office. We have policy in place that determines when someone is even eligible to be considered for medical clemency. We would keep those policies in place for the terminally ill. And I understand that's not the main issue of concern now, but it does require the certification of 2 doctors, 1 doctor who cannot work for the Department of Corrections, or 2 independent doctors. In terms of the disability piece, that doesn't exist as an option for the parole board at this point. But I will tell you, in conversations with other board members, we would adopt the same policy that it would require 2 doctors to certify that the person is permanently disabled, and 1 would at least have to be an independent doctor, and 1 could be a DOC doctor. What we did in crafting this bill is we stole from the Republican version of the First Step Act that was recently passed on the federal level, and this bill doesn't go as far as that bill does. This is a much more restrictive bill in nature. The First Step Act allows, President Trump signed the First Step Act, which allows the release of those offenders that are within 18 months of death. Ours is within 12 months of death. In terms of the definition of permanently disabled or debilitated medical condition, we would adopt policy that defines completely disabled as someone that cannot carry on self-care and who is totally confined to a bed or chair. So, Senator Sproul, I would have to disagree with the Secretary. I would not render you eligible for parole if you were in the Department of Corrections. but I would consider you not a risk to public safety.
Thank you so much.
Additionally to that, the or component from the First Step Act is that the offender is only able to engage in limited self-care and is confined for 50% of waking hours to a bed or chair. We, in terms of making a decision about release being compatible with public safety, we have 7 retired law enforcement investigators who help in our investigations. One of them worked for the Department of Corrections for 40 years. He does a very deep intelligence dive. We involve victim services from the local Commonwealth Attorney's offices. We read PSIs. We look at everything. We look at who they are now and who they were then.
Thank you.
And we look very closely at where they're going to go, because a good home plan with a lot of support in the community is what ensures success. We've had a lot of success releasing people on medical clemency. As Senator Hanger had indicated, this window of time to be able to release them is very short. And that does 2 things. From a morality standpoint, if that doesn't compel you that we should open up that window, what should compel you is the cost of continued incarceration of the sickest population and the most disabled population. But I do want to assure this body that we take our work very seriously. We take the safety of the Commonwealth of Virginia and the citizens very seriously, and we would responsibly implement regulation, and that regulation would have to be approved by the governor's office.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. That was very thorough. Last person we were going to have speak was Senator DeStef.
Madam Chairman.
Oh, do you have a question?
Yes. Before
Senator DeStef may Senator McDougal speak on your behalf.
Madam Chairman, the chairman mentioned the word complete permanent disability. That does not exist in the words before us. So I'm very much okay with the terminal ill. I think that is universal agreement. But this, going to what Senator Spruill was asking about, does not address that question, and that's not here. Complete is not there. It just says permanent. It doesn't say severity or how bad it is. It does not articulate that. So, Madam Chairman, I'd move to strike out the language that references permanent physical disability. So terminally ill would be the language that's left.
Second.
So your motion is to remove lines 14 and 15, to strike lines 14 and 15?
It does, Madam Chairman. It would also be
Line 22.
Line 22 IV up to
Okay.
V.
Does everybody understand the amendment?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator Bell.
ask that we allow her to speak to this issue, because it is going to cause some complications.
Okay, Ms. Bennett.
Yes, Madam Chair. That would completely eliminate our ability to consider those that are physically disabled. When I referenced the language complete disability, I was referring to the regulations. So the First Step Act allowed the Bureau of Prisons to determine what the definitions meant within the First Step Act, and that's how the Bureau of Prisons interpreted severely, permanently disabled. I'm sorry, permanently physically disabled.
Okay.
So it's really a policy distinction, and what I was trying to explain is what that policy would look like. Yes.
All right, an amendment is before us, and the patron does not view it as a favorable amendment, but I believe we have to take a vote on the amendment, and then we'll take a vote on the bill. Okay, Senator DeStef, you were patient. Did you want to speak to the amendment or the bill?
Well, I wasn't sure if my button worked. I'm not sure if my hand works, but I would like to speak to the bill. And Madam Chairwoman, words
Madam
mean
Chair, point of
something.
order. Are we speaking to the motion that's on the floor in front of the body right now?
We are speaking to the amendment, but I had asked Senator DeStef to defer to Senator McDougal. I had actually called on Senator DeStef earlier before the amendment was there. So go ahead, Senator DeStef.
Point of order, Madam Chairman. Unless he's speaking to the amendment, he's out of order. That's the point. I think he's speaking to the bill. And so we need to focus on the motion before us before we focus on the bill.
Very good. Senator DeStef.
Madam Chairwoman, so I'm very happy that folks are explaining what I'm speaking on before I actually speak on it. I think that's fantastic.
Please speak
and
to the amendment.
I'd like to speak to the amendment at this time. So with respect to the amendment, we're talking about eliminating permanently physically disabled for the reason of, we're talking about progressive medical conditions caused by injury, disease, or illnesses that render a person permanently or irreversibly physically disabled. We're also talking about down below where it says, or who is permanently physically disabled is eligible for consideration by the parole board. We're codifying this, and when we codify something, words mean something. We have lawyers who sue on this all day long on what these words mean. And what we heard the administration and what we've heard the chairwoman of the parole board explain are not what we're codifying in Word today. What we're codifying in Word today is that somebody, and I'll use the example, I have a severe hearing loss. I do a good job when Lionel speaks, I look at him so I can read his lips. That's a progressive problem that is a disability that continues for the rest of my life and will continue to get worse. What we're putting in code and codifying today is, and hopefully we'll remove it, is something that will be fought by attorneys. And we're saying it's something as simple as a progressive hearing loss.
Okay.
Now, I understand what we're saying over here, Madam Chairwoman, but words mean something and we're codifying something.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you.
DeSteffe. There is an amendment before the body. Does anybody need an explanation of the amendment? I may ask for a voice vote. If the chair is unclear, we will go up on the board. Senator McDougal's amendment was to, I will ask staff to read it. David May, would you please read the amendment before us?
Madam Chair, it would ultimately result in, I believe, 3 line amendments. The first would be at the beginning of line 14, strike all of lines 14 and line 15. The second amendment would be on line 21, after the stricken petition, comma, insert or. And the third would be on line 22, after terminally ill, strike the comma, through physically disabled.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment by voice vote signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. No. The chair rules that the noes have it and the amendment is defeated. The bill is before us.
Move to report and re-refer to finance.
Second.
Substitute motion, Madam Chair. I think takes motion to amend and report, and I think that takes precedence.
Okay, substitute motion is before us to amend the bill as was previously
speak to it?
discussed. Had the amendment as was previously discussed?
No, ma'am.
Or-
Substitute motion to amend and report, and I'd like to speak to that amendment.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all this talk about permanently physically disabled, that's going to be taken up by the parole board during their consideration. The thing that I'm troubled most with is the word that says other than a class 1 felony. My amendment is to strike on line 17, comma, other than a class 1 felony, comma. And here's the reason. Somebody is served 20 years for a class 1 felony murder, has stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and this bill prevents him from being released on geriatric release. That's nonsense. I'd ask that those words be struck and then the bill be reported.
I second that.
Okay, there are 2 motions. Okay, staff,
Yeah, Joe, you have
Madam Clerk,
Right.
Madam
We have
Chair,
first-
move to amend.
yeah, we are, okay. The motion is to amend. We have to first adopt that amendment. And does anybody have, I need a second?
A second.
Mr. Sproul seconded the motion. Okay, all those in,
Madam Chair,
yes?
if I could speak to this, while I understand where the center's coming from with this, there are 471 inmates who are class 1 felons. These are particularly violent felons.
Cares.
I would ask that you not approve that amendment, because there was special precautions we took, and that's why we did not include, because it makes the dangerous issue much more difficult. I thank the chair.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment? We can do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed to the amendment signify no. The amendment fails.
Madam Chair, move to report and re-refer to finance.
Second.
Okay, so what we're reporting is the bill before us, and we're re-referring it to finance, and
Madam
there is
Chair.
a second. Senator Hanger.
Thank you, and I don't want to complicate this, but since a substitute motion was defeated, I was going to at least explore another substitute motion to amend on line 15 after disabled. And I'm not sure that my suggestion will be artful, but Madam Chairman, I would suggest that we add after physically disabled, and such condition renders the individual no longer a threat to society.
That's the amendment before us. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed to that amendment signify by saying no. The ayes have it. The bill before us is amended. As amended, I need a motion now. I need a new motion
Move the
because we just
report as
passed-
amended.
Okay.
Second.
And re-refer to finance.
All right, Senator McPike's motion is to report this bill as amended and re-refer to finance. The second.
Second.
Second by Senator Sproul. All those in favor, please go up on the board. Clerk, open the roll.
Ayes 9, no 6.
Thank you, Senator Bell. Your bill has amended, passes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the committee and all the time on this complicated issue.
Okay. Yep. Senator Peake. Senator Peake.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Good morning. You're going to speak to us on 181 and 190.
Yes, yes, Madam Chair, 189, Senate Bill 189.
Okay, now both of these bills need to go to finance as well. Are you aware?
I assumed that they would. In fact, I've brought them before, and I don't think I've ever been through this committee, but it seemed like they sent them straight to finance where they could die. But I would argue, Madam Chair, that Senate Bill 189 really shouldn't have to go to finance. It's the prisoner bill because the department's already funded of corrections. They're supposed to house prisoners, so they're just housing them at State Department facilities, state corrections facilities instead of county facilities. So really, it shouldn't have any financial impact because they get the money anyway. But I'm happy to address it.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair. Question of the
Senator McPike.
It's a question of the senator. You say it shouldn't go to finance, yet the language you're striking is general appropriation and jail cost. Is that correct?
But they receive, the state has the funding for these prisoners. But I know it's going to finance.
Okay, it does have a
If it
fiscal
makes it out of
impact,
this
even if it's in the budget. As you know, lawmakers can rewrite the budget, so this is to your advantage. I think this is very straightforward. I'd like a motion on 189.
Move to report.
Second.
Refer to finance.
Thank you. Senator McPike makes the motion to adopt and re-report, and there's a second. Will the clerk please open the roll? Okay, it reports and it's
Ayes 14,
re-referred
no
to
zero.
finance. Okay, Senator Peake.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. My next bill is Senate Bill 190, which deals with the CSA problem that's been going on, Child Services Act, that localities have been dealing with for a number of years. And I've brought this bill, I think this is the third straight session I've brought this bill. The first time I brought it was my second session, and then they created a committee supposedly to study this problem of IEP programs for children in public schools, getting treatment at, or getting educated at private schools and private programs. They created a committee which I think over the course of 2 separate summers did not meet or do anything. It's my understanding that now JLARC has begun a study of this, and I may tell you, they may have met that, but let me strike that language. I'm not aware of anything really happening. Now I understand that JLARC is doing a study in November, but it's a huge problem. It's been a problem since the time that I've been in here. It cost certain localities a large sum of money to handle these IEPs in the private sector. And the goal of of the code as it exists is to place the authority at the community level and provide greater flexibility in the use of these funds. And the goal is to return students to the mainstream public instruction as soon as practicable. And so I would like to allow us to use public schools to develop their own programs to treat. A lot of this rises with autistic children, children with handicaps, and a lot of the public schools are developing very good programs, or certainly within their region, very good programs to treat autistic children, children with specific problems, instead of having to go the private route, which is much more expensive. And in some cases, there was a nightmare story several years back of a student that was getting treatment and going to a private school in Florida. The school system had to pay for that student to go to private school in Florida. So it's a big problem for localities.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Senator Mason.
Senator Peake, you remember last year we passed this request for localities to tell us what their costs were and how they handled these situations.
I know I brought it up last year, yes.
Madam
But
Chairman.
I can't remember what happened, yes.
So unfortunately, Senator, only like 39 localities responded to the request. And there was some question as to how we made the request and what we did. But this, you've highlighted an enormous problem. But do you, are you aware what percentage of CSA funding goes to these cases?
I am not, Senator.
And I'm going to, there's someone in the audience
Someone
who's
knows.
Scott, I don't know if CSA is in the audience or not. I'm sorry, Madam Chairman. But one final question. So you're trying to give the localities the ability to target this money and spend it themselves rather than going through the CSA system, is that correct?
Correct, to develop their own programs if possible and treat the students locally as close to their home as possible, as opposed to them being sent elsewhere, private schools, whatever, to save the localities their money, because that money that's spent on private education and to treat these students, well, it's gone, it's out of their budget, it's money that's not being spent in their school system. And so it's to help the school systems. I believe Fluvanna brought it, Goochland, several, Louisa, all have had problems with this and concerns, and have developed programs, at least to treat or to educate a certain number of their students. And so that's the point of it. And nothing's happened. It's been talked about, and nothing has happened.
This is a very complicated issue. We heard this at the Commission on Youth. It is not easily done, and frankly, I want to hear the results of the JLARC study. I would not be comfortable moving forward on this, but you do have speakers, and I would like to hear your speakers.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Katie Boyle. I'm with the Virginia Association of Counties. Historically, we have supported bills of this concept to provide some more flexibility for the use of CSA funds to support public schools and serving children that have high-level needs. So some localities are investing in public day programs, essentially. And I know some jurisdictions are interested in having perhaps private providers come in and provide services within their school divisions, sort of on their campuses, and there's some question as to whether that's permissible currently. Just wanted to speak to Senator Mason's question about about the rate study that was being done last year. That actually went out to providers, and not localities had to provide information about the rates that they were paying, but the detailed information that was being requested was actually from providers. So just as a matter of clarity. So we are supportive of this concept and, look forward to having some further discussion about it. Thank you.
Welcome.
Janet Arison with the Virginia Municipal League, and just ditto to everything Katie said. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Bill Elwood, representing the Virginia Association of Independent Specialized Education Facilities. We are the private special education schools that provide these services under CSA. We appreciate what Senator Peake's trying to do. I think he has good intentions on this, but we have some concerns about this. This would be a very significant policy change in the way that CSA is run. This would allow public school systems to tap into some sufficient state CSA pool of funds that has already been set aside to provide these services in a private setting when it has already been decided by the localities that the children can't be served in the public setting. It's a very complex issue, as you've talked about. This bill would have significant fiscal impact. JLARC is in the process of right now doing a study on CSA and also on special education, and we really would hope that you would allow those to go through before you take any further action on this. The Joint Subcommittee for HHR Oversight did review this starting 2 years ago. They went out into the field and visited some of the private schools. Part of the reason that they didn't do anything at that time was they determined that this was too complex of an issue for them to be handling in that setting, which is what led to the JLARC studies. So thank you.
Madam Chairman?
Thank you. Senator McDougal.
I have a question. So if I understand this right now, if a individual is at a public institution for which the reimbursement is around $5,000 per student, give or take, and they could give the care and education to that student for $15,000 or $20,000, this would enable them to do it. But right now, if we don't do it, the only option for that school system is to find a much more expensive option, which could be $30,000 or $50,000 a year, because they cannot get more than the traditional $5,000 give or take reimbursement. This would add that flexibility, thus saving the Commonwealth and allowing the student to be able to be in the school system with other children. Is that not accurate?
I think what we're looking at in terms of, and again, the numbers may not be totally correct, but in all the meetings I've been to, I think that localities, the average has been about $13,000 a year, but I don't think that we're comparing apples to apples. The children that could be served at $13,000 a year are being served, and then it gets to a point where they cannot provide those services anymore, and then the acuity levels are higher that can't be served in the public schools, and so they are sent.
I mean, the challenge.
Using the CSA funds.
The challenge is the CSA dollars are being used in both ways. The local governments are using the dollars to help the same kids, and the public schools then would be tapping into these dollars to help these children. So there's only one pot of money, and we need to determine what the best allocation of those resources might be. This is extraordinarily complicated. It'll hit every local government. It'll affect every public and private school system. We really do need a JLARC to look into this.
Madam Chairman, my perception is right now, there's no option but for schools to send children to private institutions that often, majority of the time, are not in their jurisdiction, may not even be in the Commonwealth. This would allow some of those students to be able to stay with other students in their community and stay in their local area.
I don't disagree that the intent of this is very, very noble. I am not sure if we have the right pathway forward there. I do know that it's complicated, and I would feel more comfortable having the recommendations from JLARC.
Madam Chair, if
Senator
I could address,
Peake.
thank you, if I could address Senator McDougal. I think that's correct, and you talked about a financial impact, but I don't think it would, this allows it, does not require it. So the locality is not going to incur any financial impact that it does not want to incur. This simply allows it, and one of the examples we have right now, the way it is right now, the code allows the locality to use CSA funds for a child who is incarcerated in a local facility, but you can't use it for a child who's going to your school. And so it's just that, it's kind of a bizarre situation, but that's why I'm here, to make these complicated problems seem simple, so we can pass some legislation and address them. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Thank you for bringing this forward. It's an important issue. Okay, the bill is before us.
Move to report.
Okay. Motion, we have to re-refer it to finance. A motion was made to report the bill and re-refer to finance. All those in favor signify by saying, you have to go up on the board. I apologize. Clerk, please open.
Ayes 8, no 7.
Okay, the bill is reported and re-referred to finance. Thank you. Okay, the only bills left are member bills, and there is, I will call on Senator Locke, Senator Cosgrove, and then myself. Senator Locke.
Madam Chair, there is a substitute for Senate Bill 124.
Okay.
Move the substitute. Second.
Okay, I think this is the place. This is an amendment in the nature of a substitute. It's before us. Any objections to adopting this amendment? Please signify. Please.
Know that we know what it is, so.
Fair enough.
The substitute just adds TANF. What Senate Bill 124 does is it provides that a person who is otherwise eligible to receive food stamps and now adds TANF benefits shall not be denied such assistance solely because he or she has been convicted of a drug-related felony. Under current law, a person otherwise eligible basically shall not be denied for these benefits. And to explain, drug offenders face a life sentence after serving their time by being banned from SNAP and TANF. This bill seeks to lift those bans on possession and distribution. Statistically, most drug felons are from low-income households and thus are unable to successfully re-enter society without SNAP and TANF, increasing their chances of recidivism, which costs the state more money to imprison them than it would cost to provide these public benefits. Studies show that providing the public benefits reduces recidivism, meaning this is all very preventable if we repeal these bans. Repealing the ban will provide access to important employment training opportunities through the SNAP and TANF programs. This ban has a disproportionate impact on women and children, the overwhelming recipient of such benefits. Children are being essentially punished for the acts of their parents. And there have been trends toward repeal. Since 1996, 41 states and Washington, D.C. have opted out of or modified the ban. So I think that Virginia should follow this trend. And I have some individuals here who would like to speak to the bill.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Members of the committee. Salam Bhatti, Virginia Poverty Law Center. We support this bill, and we have some members of the public who wish to speak.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Fraser Hunter. I live in Richmond. In brief time that I have, I wanted to ask the support on SB 124. I was born in poverty right here in Richmond into a house where food and electricity were rare. I had seen things by the time I was 8 that nobody should ever see, including my mom's multiple suicide attempts and my dad and mom fighting, and both of them in and out of jail. As a child, I hung out with my older brothers who hung out with drug users, so I got involved with drugs too. When I was 19, I was charged with possession with the intent to distribute, and I lost my job. and it was hard getting another job as a felony. I take responsibility for my crime, and I served my time. Things went from bad to worse when I got shot after a man tried to rob me. After barely surviving, I ended up at my mom's again without electricity and food. I applied for SNAP, but because of my drug felony, I couldn't receive that hand up, but I didn't sit around. I was hungry for a better life, so I got a job working at a restaurant and went to working 30 hours a week and went to barber school. I passed both of my tests. I am now a licensed barber, working full-time. Like I said, I'm hungry for a better life. I'm speaking at the Salvation Rehabilitation Program and at schools and other youth programs, telling them to stay away from drugs and the life that I went in when I was little. And
we appreciate your remarks, and may I ask you if you could conclude perhaps in the next, within the next 30 seconds?
Include?
Could just finish your, summarize your position?
Okay, yes, ma'am, yes,
Thank you.
ma'am. And giving back, it makes me feel good and changing my life for the better. But I'm still in poverty despite having to serve my time. I still have a life sentence from getting the hand up from SNAP. Like I said, I'm hungry for a better life, but I don't see why I'm still being punished more often, still hungry at times. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you vote for this bill. It would change my life and others.
Thank you for coming. For those of you who still want to speak, if you're in support, if you could just say you support it. If for anybody who may oppose it, if you can just, no, you can just come to the podium and say if you support it.
I support it.
Thank you.
I support it.
And if you could say your group, that would be.
My name's Carl Phillips. I'm a veteran, and I support it.
Thank you very much.
I'm Pamela Little Hill, the Director of Social Services and Support, Smith, Virginia, and I'm in support.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Sherry Neal, Legislative Liaison for the City of Portsmouth. We support this bill.
Thank you very much. I just wanted you to, any other speakers? Senator Locke, have you concluded?
That's all we have,
Okay,
Madam
great.
Chair. Only that this will, we will be following in the footsteps of 41 other states and the District of Columbia who have either completely repealed the ban or partially modified.
Okay. Your amendment essentially incorporates my bill into yours.
Yes.
So we did not actually adopt your amendment, so the easier way to do it, I believe, would be to roll my bill into yours. Are you amenable to that?
Yes.
Okay. May I have, I believe I need a voice vote for that. May I have a motion? Okay. Thank you very much. So we will each be co-patrons. Any objections?
Madam Chair?
Hold on, I can do that by voice vote, I believe. Okay. Those, may we go on the board, please? We are rolling 155 into Senate Bill 124. Roll call vote, please. Okay, very good. Thank you. Are there questions, patrons? Senator Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, your Bill 155 had language in it that did not, that is not included in Senator Locke's bill, particularly the language dealing with going from lines 15 down to 19.
Yeah,
Did you mean to delete that from your bill?
I meant to delete that from my bill, so I'll have to ask staff what, if I could, when it's my turn to speak.
Madam Chair, since we're going to incorporate your bill into Senate Bill 124, we won't need to make the amendment.
Because her bill would prevail, would be my understanding. It's the lower number. Okay.
Madam Chairman?
Point of clarification. Thank you.
Madam Chairman?
Senator McDougal.
Even though we've incorporated them, we've not adopted the substitute, so that we're still now operating under.
We have not adopted the substitute. We're still taking comments. Okay. We've got two bills rolled together. The Senate Bill 124 is before us. I move the substitute. You move this. Very, very good.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of the substitute bill, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Oh, is there a no? No. One no? Okay. Okay. All right. Now I ask 3 noes. Now we actually need a motion to pass the, as I recall,
Madam
to pass the
Chairman.
bill as amended. No, we don't. No, it's a voice vote. However, we do need a vote on the bill itself, okay? So I need a motion on 124. And I need a motion on
Madam Chair,
adopting 124.
move to
and
report.
Re-referring to finance.
Move to report and refer.
Okay. Motion's before us. You all heard it. The report, re-refer to finance. Please open the board. Thank you.
Ayes 9, no 6.
Thank you.
Your bill reports. Okay, Senator Cosgrove.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a fairly
You'll
easy
be the
bill.
last
This is Senate Bill 355. All this bill does, Madam Chair, is to direct the Board of Social Services to promulgate regulations concerning audiovisual recording of residents in assisted living facilities, and requires the Department of Social Services to convene a work group of stakeholders to make recommendations on those regulations. Right now, Madam Chairman, basically there are a lot of folks in assisted living facilities. Sometimes they are terribly understaffed, but this would put together a working group so that basically there could be audiovisual capability so the family could actually see their loved one, but they would have to work that out, with the facility and the providers. And I believe there's a couple of people here that would care to speak to it.
Very good.
Good morning. I'm Dana Parsons,
Good
Vice
morning.
President and Legislative Counsel with Leading Age Virginia. We represent the continuum of aging services, including not-for-profit assisted living, and wanted to let you know that we support the bill.
Thank you. Okay. The bill is before us. It's,
Madam Chair, before we do that,
okay. Senator Reeves.
Senator Cosgrove, what are they, I know that people are using this now, so there's no regulation now, or do you know if there's current regulation that's out there, or what, how are we doing this now?
I don't
'Cause know
believe the regulations exist. They've been working on them in the past, but I think they're starting to come to one accord
Right.
on the regulations. Again, it has to be agreeable to the provider and to the patient and families and that type of thing. I don't think there would be a requirement that the facilities provide the audiovisual. I think that would have to be up to the individual patient.
But this just sets the framework, so if they choose to do that, that's framework. All right, Madam Chair, with that explanation, I would move to report.
Second.
Okay, motion's before us. Will the clerk please open the roll?
Ayes 15, no 0.
Thank you,
The
Madam
bill reports. Okay. All right, the only bills left are mine, and I will be very quick, and I will ask Senator Locke, do you want to chair for me? Thank you. Okay, I will start with Senate Bill 181, and it's a commercial lifestyle center bill. But what it does, it's very simple. On line 74, currently, commercial lifestyle center covers 25 acres. I am changing the 25 acres to 10 acres. 10 acres matches the, there's an industry standard for the Commercial Lifestyle Center Association, and that is 10 acres, and we just wanted to come into conformance with that. We also wanted to make it possible for areas other than just large rural areas to be able to partake in the Commercial Lifestyle Center license. That's the beginning and end of my bill. I can explain to you what that license is, but I think you can all see for yourself. I respectfully ask passage of this bill.
Are there any questions to the patron with regard to Senate Bill 181?
Motion.
Anyone in the audience wishing to speak to Senate Bill 181? Okay, motion on the bill.
Motion to report.
Second. It's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 181 be reported.
Could you,
You've got it.
you're voting for me? Thank you.
Ayes 15-0.
That bill passes. Next bill, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My next bill is Senate Bill 187. And what this does is it removes the 2-year limitation, what we would call it the TANF cliff. Right now, our state code requires you to do 2 years and then to stop and get off of TANF, go to work, and then you may come back on. The federal requirement for TANF is a maximum of 5 years. My bill will allow you to select that 5-year period whenever it is appropriate to help you become more self-sufficient. Oftentimes, educational programs, certificates, they take more than 2 years, and it has been very disruptive for TANF individuals to have to stop, get off of TANF, they quit their schooling, and then they don't go back. So they never end up with the credentials to get a job that enables them to support their families. I respectfully ask that this bill pass, Senate Bill 187.
Are there any questions with regard to Senate Bill 187? Hold up.
Hold on, we got a speaker.
Speaker with regard to Senate Bill 187.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, Salam from the Virginia Poverty Law Center. We support this bill. We think it's a great idea. It's unfortunate that people have to have interrupted help. It's like putting unleaded gasoline into a rocket ship and thinking it's going to leave the atmosphere, but it doesn't. So 60 months straight is much better than an interrupted time. Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Senator McDougal.
Senator Favola, is there
Yes, sir.
a reason why if the max is 5 years, we wouldn't put that in there, just replace the 2 years with 5 years?
The 5 years is a federal requirement. So what is your question? Is it
My question is, why wouldn't our statute then track the 5 years?
I don't know what the history was back there, but our statute retains the 5 years because TANF is federal money. We're just changing the 2 years, which we have always had, because there was this interest in getting people to work right away. And now we've evolved in our thinking that maybe getting an education or training would be the preferred route, and that will take more than 2 years, so we want to get rid of the cliff.
Madam Chair.
Senator Reeves.
Senator Vole, I think what Senator McDougal was trying to say is why wouldn't you write into the code a maximum of no more than 5 years total time or something similar to that, so it would be in alignment somehow scripted in
I
there?
guess we'd have to ask. General Counsel was looking at the special section of the code.
Madam Chairman. Servo.
Oh, Servo.
Speaking to the bill. Thank you. I think by not having the 5 years in there, we simply leave it up to the federal government as to how long to do it. And if the Trump administration shortens it, then that would be binding on us. Or if it gets extended, then it'll get extended. But in the absence of a deadline, that just leaves it up to the federal government, I think and I don't think it needs a limit.
I can certainly entertain an amendment. I will ask our counsel.
Madam Chair, yeah, and just speaking to that point, I mean, that would be correct. If we don't put it in, we would just continue to follow the federal rules, which basically, when it comes down to it, we have to follow the federal rules anyway. We have another section of the code, 632-600, which is more of a general directive that we do have to comply with the federal rules. So the only issue is we're going to be bound if we don't speak to the measure. We'll be bound by the federal rules, and if we do, and then federal laws change,
We still are
we'd
under
have
the
to-
federal laws because it's a federal program. So that was the rationale,
We could limit it, but we could not go
with
beyond.
the 5 years.
Okay, any other comments?
This is an TANF Program Manager.
Mark Golden from Department of Social Services, TANF Program Manager. One other issue with the 5-year time limit, that is laid out in federal code. The other part is in this state code section, which we're amending, that applies to view participants, which is a subset of TANF. So it wouldn't be parallel, I guess is what I'm saying. You would still need to go back to the federal code, which is the 5 years.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I would make the motion to move to report. And re-refer to finance, yes, ma'am.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that Senate Bill 187 be reported and re-referred to finance. Any further discussion?
Oh, sorry.
Come on, Hobie, come on, Hobie. Okay.
Ayes 15, no zero.
Bills reported.
I would just say that shouldn't have any fiscal implication because we're not enhancing the eligibility pool or the years. So that shouldn't be a problem. Madam Chair, my last bill is Senate Bill 212. And what this is, I do have an amendment.
Madam Chair, there would be a total of 4 line amendments. The first of which was the only one that was prepared before the meeting, so I have that written out. It's an enactment clause, and basically what it does is instead of rolling this bill into the big ABC omnibus bill, we kept it separate, but we crafted an enactment that would allow this bill to go into effect this July and allow this performing arts facility to begin operating throughout the next 12 months, which they would not be able to do under the omnibus bill because it has a delayed effective date of July 1st, 2021. But the enactment also provides that when the omnibus comes into effect, this bill or this performing arts facility license is going to be rolled into our new structure. So I can read to you the technical wording of it at the committee's pleasure. I did have 3 other line amendments as well that I've marked on the bill here.
We're essentially just trying to, we will bring this bill under a code conformity
Madam Chair,
exercise.
I believe those were technical amendments, and I've spoken to David, and the subcommittee agrees that the way David has written it out, it'll let these people do business now, and then upon that future effective date, then they would just roll under the whole omnibus bill, and I think that's the summary.
There are a few word changes.
Correct.
Line 20, would you start with that?
Correct, Madam Chair.
Section 20.
So we did receive 3 more today at the beginning of the meeting, and those would be, the first is on line 186. After any, insert corporate and. The second is on line 186. After provided that the, insert corporate and the last one would be on line 187. After long-term lease, insert comma, management, comma.
Need a motion on those amendments?
So moved, Madam Chair. Second.
Moved and seconded that we adopt those amendments. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Those amendments are adopted.
Okay, Madam Chair, this just allows for a performing arts license, and we would have in excess of 1,400 patrons. This performing arts license falls in line with a number of other licenses that are currently on the code. Right now, we have been doing carve-outs. At some point, I'm hoping we can actually review the code and put everything under one section and under one umbrella license. I think it's a good idea. People are going to see a show or a performance, and this license will enable the, I want to get it right, the selling of wine and spirits.
Move to
Mixed
report.
beverages.
Moved and seconded that Senate Bill 212 be reported. All those in favor, please say aye. No, vote.
This time he's all sitting there waiting. Ayes 12, nay 0, abstentions 3.
Thank you, Madam
That
Chair.
bill's reported. that clears the docket.
No more business to come before the committee this morning. The committee rises. Move to adjourn.